Okay, I want to switch topics just mildly, and I want you
Okay.
to kind of step out of your scholar role and more
Okay.
into your cultural critic role.
Oh my.
Yeah, nothing hardcore. We talked about the rabbinics, and I have a lot of thoughts, and I'm genuinely interested to hear your thoughts on Christians who kind of use the rabbinics to backfill what Jesus was saying and doing. And I'll give you one example that the first time I heard it, I didn't even know anything about rabbinics. I just knew it didn't smell right. Is when I heard Rob Bell give this talk about in the dust of the rabbi, like a disciple followed so closely they were in the dust of the rabbi, and they were so be a dusty disciple. And I was like, that sounds more like salesmanship than scholarship, but and I know actually where he got that view from. Like I know the genealogy of that view, but essentially he's turning to rabbinic literature that's several hundred years after Jesus, and then kind of projecting that back. What do you do when you run into this? Right? I mean, I don't know if it's a problem. It's just one of those things that I don't know what the method should be. For discerning where the rabbinic conversations are in the first century when we don't really have anything written down. I mean, you can clearly see some being echoed, but we don't have them written down
Yeah.
until the 250s, 300s.
Yeah. Couple things. One is I'd answer this question in two ways. One is there is a exoticizing. There's an exoticizing
Yeah.
of the rabbinics because they're so other and distinct and exotic. And so there's sort of a thrill in seeing, oh, Jesus was doing this sort of thing too. Like this is his world, and so there's a delight that I don't see maybe as many academics as doing that, but
Right.
I think you do see it in quite a bit of some popular circles that are not anti-rabbinic Judaism, but are sometimes perhaps unintentionally doing the opposite, sort of exoticizing
Right.
it, and then saying that, like, yeah, that Jesus was just walking these waters, and like, okay, like I'm sort of halfway there, right? I'm like, I do think he's doing that sort of stuff in the sense that he is on occasion providing very sophisticated arguments for certain laws, or assuming already a sophisticated argument and then building on it, that sort of thing. So but you just have to, you do just have to recognize that, like, Mishnah could be as early as 200, but it's just not. You just can't assume that everything that's in it was also how it was being practiced in the first century. And then once you get to the Babylonian Talmud and everything, that's different geographical location and centuries later, again, you cannot straightforwardly assume that what's going on there is going on in the first century. So fair enough. Now, the ways in which I think there is a justifiable use is, there are lots of rulings that are there in Qumran and there in Philo Josephus, whatever, that then do appear in the Mishnah pretty like either in which you can tell that, yeah, that's the ruling they're talking about. Like this ruling that's here in Bava Kama is also the same thing that Philo and Josephus are talking about, or
100 years before Jesus or 50 years before
or
Jesus.
100, or it's a ruling that you can tell that they're building on and distinguishing from what they don't agree with in whatever, from however they knew the rulings of Qumran, but just like that whatever ruling is there is clearly, I don't know, it seems to be pretty straightforwardly like implicitly addressing and coming to a different conclusion about it, but still implies that they're aware of a trajectory and either building on it or deviating from it. So sometimes when you see those cases, I think there's a more justifiable use. I mean, the example I give in the book that I draw on a lot is, or I draw on just once actually, is the notion that eye for eye was often commuted to monetary fines. Like Josephus comments on this, Philo comments on this, and then it's there in Bava Kama 8 Mishnah. And I think, okay, that's a pretty good example. Like Philo and Josephus both describe it as like, and Philo's like really mad about it, which attests is like a pretty widely practiced thing. And now it's like being here talked about,
Hey there, if you've benefited from this content at all, please hit the like and subscribe, or subscribe and like, one of those or both of them together on this video. It helps us tremendously with the math algorithm nerd monsters. Right.
But sometimes also you'll get the reverse, where you'll get a legal argument that's in the Mishnah and you don't get the same ruling in any other extant text, but it seems that maybe the principles that are operating are well known, either in Jewish texts or non-Jewish texts. The one I think about a lot is someone who's commissioned to a task gets to subordinate some commandments when they might hinder the completion of that task. So, for example, if you're commissioned to go do something, either to keep another commandment or to do something important, well, you can abstain from sleeping in a sukkah during sukkah season, because that might hinder your capacity to keep your commission duty. That's in Mishnah Sukkah 2:4. The point is that you see that echoed in another rabbinic passage, Mishnah Rosh Hashanah 1, where these people who are supposed to go testify about the new moon, they have the capacity. They set their calendar on seeing the moons. And so these people who see the new moon need to travel to Jerusalem to testify about it. And if the distance is long, they're permitted to profane the Sabbath to do that. I personally think that's a relevant argument for Matthew 12, where Jesus thinks he's doing commissioned work, and so he thinks that he gets to subordinate other commandments to that. The point is that though that particular ruling in Mishnah Rosh Hashanah 1 isn't in whatever, like Josephus or Philo or Dead Sea Scrolls, there are texts that clearly talk about someone who's been commissioned is just duty bound to complete that commission until, and he can't let anything get in that way, right? I think Josephus actually talks about the Roman, one of the Roman, the guy who was trying to the guy who was trying to erect the statue on Gaius' behalf. I forget his name now. Anyway, the point is that he talks about him that way. I think it's part of Jesus' argument in Matthew 12. I think it's baked into the sacrificial system. Like, the priests have to, in Jesus' terms, profane the Sabbath to keep the sacrifice. All this is to say is that it's definitely a spectrum. You can overcook it. Sometimes it does have to kind of be a vibe check. Like, does this smell right, or is there stuff, but I was probably pretty free with my use of rabbinic stuff in it without really describing a methodology for it. But I tried to also at the same time stick with instances where I think I see it going here in the first century, and then see it also attested here. Yeah. And then work with those texts. Anyway. Yeah.
Well, I think for the general public, though, just hearing that answer though is, this isn't, the rabbi said it, and therefore I can now read what the rabbi said into the...
Yeah, that's probably overdoing it. Just because it's attested in a rabbinic text doesn't mean that... Because, of course, the rabbinic texts themselves are sometimes citing a rabbi, and that rabbi is 100 years later. And so it's not simply that, it's in the Mishnah, and the Mishnah is recording all these opinions from the first century. Like, well, sometimes it's actually not, like, explicitly. Sometimes even the person they're citing is from the second or third generation or whatever. But then, you do have to be a bit more careful about just kind of straightforwardly assuming that it's here. So therefore, Jesus must have known about this ruling. It can be hard, but yes, if you are concerned about that particular issue, yes, I think it's good for non-scholars to also just be aware of that fact, that you can't just sort of assume everything. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, if Josephus or Philo are saying it, you can absolutely say somebody knew about it.
Widely enough
if
to...
Philo, it might not have been a discussion, though. It might have been just Philo and his friends talking about it. Yeah. So there's this question of, like, who knew what, how wide were these discussions? And and even things like, I think of Lazarus and the rich man, the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. Where, that seems to be a very well-known Egyptian folktale of a prince in Egypt and his heart being weighed against the feather of Ma'at. But it makes its way up into the Levant, into the land of Israel, and then it gets transmogrified into it's a rabbi, or it's a scholar, a Jewish scholar, or a lawyer who ends up dead or whatever. So you can tell by the framing, right? Because because I'm dealing with issues of like afterlife, and
Okay.
people are always like, well, what do you do with Lazarus and the rich man? I was like, wait, did you think going to heaven was sitting in an old man's lap and listening to screams from across an uncrossable chasm? Like, did you think that was the actual description of heaven?
Listening to the screams.
Yeah, rather, it's like, doesn't it feel a little bit more like he's tapping into like a well-known trope here, and in the same way, there's a story that he seems to be tapping into, and then twisting it at the end. If they won't listen to Moses or the prophets, they won't listen to a dead man raised. Well, that's great. The name of the book, I have it over here: Jesus and the Law of Moses.
Yep.
Did you come up with the title?
Hey, this is crazy. Not only did I come up with the title, but I am not like a graphic arts kind of guy at all.
Right.
And I made a couple suggestions, and they just did it. And they were like, "Yeah, actually, it looks great." And I was like, "Okay." So the like, I was deeply surprised, because I'm just like not a So yeah, Jesus and the Law of Moses, Gospels and Restoration of Israel within first century Judaism. That was my title. I came up with a couple others that a few friends and colleagues were like, no, this is the best one. And then the cover is the Gustave Doré print of the Matthew 12 grainfield scene, which I just always liked Doré's stuff.
Right.
So I just suggested it, and then I remember telling them, I just think it was that book called The Emergence of Sin by Jonathan Grossman or something like that, right? And its cover always felt very arresting to me, because it's like, I think it's like a black cover with like stark white letters, or something like that. And so I was like, hey, I think that's cool, but I don't really know anything about graphics, so you guys do whatever you want. And then they just like did it. So I was like, okay, great, thanks.
My book too, it's with Baker, right? So
yeah, Baker.
I sent them a mock-up. I was like, I really like this watercolor, and they just came back, same fonts, everything. They're just like, yeah, we like that. We're just going to touch it up. I was like, how did that happen?
Yeah, I was deeply surprised, but I'm grateful. I think it looks great.
Book.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate
great
that.
ideas, much needed, highly commended. So thank you, Paul, for your wisdom and sharing that with us and with the church.
Drew, thanks for having me. Thanks for the convo.